The air in Precinct 47 was thick with the smell of old coffee, stale donuts, and something vaguely metallic that Detective Elias Vance suspected was dried blood from decades past. It was 3:17 a.m. The only light came from the buzzing fluorescent tubes above and the sickly green glow of his computer monitor. Elias was a man defined by the bags under his eyes and a tie that was always slightly askew. He'd been with the NYPD's major case squad for 15 years, enough time to see the city's worst and think he was immune. He was wrong. His partner, Detective Serena Reyes, a young, sharp-witted woman who favored precision over paperwork, slammed a file folder onto his desk. "Wake up, Vance. We've got a fresh one. And this one feels wrong." Elias grunted, rubbing his temples. "They all feel wrong until they're solved, Reyes." "What is it?" "Homicide, robbery gone sideways? Missing person, initially," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, even though the precinct floor was deserted save for the desk sergeant nodding off 10 feet away. "Victim is Amelia Chen, a 28-year-old grad student. Vanished from her apartment on the Lower East Side 3 days ago. No forced entry, no struggle, just gone." Elias scoffed. "Girl ran off to Vegas with a drummer. Happens every week." Reyes leaned in, her dark eyes intense. "Her building is an old tenement. She lived on the 3rd floor. Neighbors reported hearing a sound the night she disappeared. Not a scream, not a fight. They described it as a slow, rhythmic thudding sound. Like someone dropping a bag of wet cement over and over on the ceiling." "And no one called 911? "No. They thought it was upstairs construction or a loud neighbor," Reyes sighed, frustrated. "But here's the kicker. The super finally let us into her apartment. Everything was immaculate. Her phone, wallet, and keys were on the kitchen counter. Her laptop was open to a research paper on architectural anomalies in pre-war New York housing." Elias finally sat up, the metallic smell in the air suddenly feeling sharper. "Architectural anomalies? Like what? Hidden rooms? We don't know yet. But listen to this." Reyes flipped open the file to a large, grainy photograph. It was a close-up of a wall in Amelia's living room. The wallpaper was peeling slightly at the seam, exposing the plaster underneath. The crime scene tech noticed this. No tools, no damage, but someone, or something, had carefully scraped away the paint and plaster in a small, circular area, about the size of a 50-cent piece. Elias tipped the photo, running a calloused thumb over the image. The exposed spot wasn't the bare brick of the building. It was a perfectly smooth, almost black material, like polished obsidian. "What is that?" Elias asked, his voice low. "We ran it through the lab," Reyes said, her voice barely a breath. "It's not brick, it's not wood, and it's not any known building material." The analyst flagged the results as inconclusive, but she added a handwritten note at the bottom of the report. She pointed to the fine print. The note was stark. "Sample composition is primarily non-organic, silica-based material with trace elements of fossilized human dentin. This spot on the wall is, biologically speaking, part of a tooth that a profound silence descended on the precinct." Elias felt the familiar dread, not the everyday kind, but the deep, existential dread reserved for things that defy logic and order. He looked down at the photograph again. The smooth, black disc in the wall. He pushed his chair back, the sound scraping loudly on the floor. "Get a warrant for the entire building, Reyes. We're going back to the apartment. And this time, we aren't looking for a missing girl. We're looking for what the hell is inside that wall." The metallic smell, he realized, wasn't old blood. It was the faint, cold scent of pulverized bone. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that the slow, rhythmic thudding the neighbors heard was not a weight falling. It was something trying to get in or trying to get out. Elias and Reyes were back in Amelia Chen's apartment by 5 a.m., the rising sun still a distant, cynical promise. They were accompanied by a team of crime scene specialists, 2 uniformed officers, and Dr. Ben Carter, the precinct's most skeptical forensic architect, whose expression currently blended annoyance with genuine bewilderment. Detective Vance, with all due respect, I was sound asleep, Dr. Carter grumbled, adjusting his glasses. You woke me up for a speck of ceramic and a dubious lab report suggesting it's a fossilized tooth. This is a 1920 structure. The walls are plaster and lathe. End of story. Then explain this, Doc. Elias pointed to the small, smooth black circle in the wall, now cordoned off with bright yellow tape. Look close. See the way the plaster around the edges is scored? Not chipped, scored, like something was rotating and grinding its way through. Carter knelt, pulling out a specialized laser measuring device. As he scanned the wall, the device emitted a sharp, high-pitched whine that cut through the silence. He frowned at the reading on the display. That's impossible, he muttered. The density reading here is off the charts. It's solid, far beyond the expected density of old concrete or brick. It's registering higher than tempered steel. Reyes, standing beside him, tapped the display. Higher than steel? So, it's not a tooth, but some kind of ultradense mineral deposit? I don't know what it is, Detective, Carter said, his skepticism crumbling into professional alarm. But it's not part of the building's original structure. It's an insertion. And it's not just a speck. He stood up, looking at the entire wall. If my readings are correct, this material runs deep, possibly the entire thickness of the wall, and the composition appears continuous. This isn't a slab of rock, it's a sheer surface. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Reyes, get everyone out of the bedroom. Doc, I need you to confirm your deepest fears. Use the thermal imaging, see if this anomaly runs floor to ceiling. Reyes quickly ushered the technicians into the hall. Dr. Carter activated a military-grade thermal camera. The screen flared to life, showing the room in a wash of blues and reds. The standard plaster walls glowed a cool blue, but the wall that held the black circle was an unnerving, perfect gray, a complete thermal void. No heat signature, Carter whispered, adjusting the focus. It's insulating perfectly. But wait, look at the edges. As he zoomed in, a faint, almost imperceptible pattern began to emerge at the junction of the regular plaster and the thermal void. It wasn't a solid rectangle. The dark, dense material was patterned. It was a series of perfectly concentric circles, etched into the wall, each circle slightly larger than the last, radiating outward from the small black spot like rings of a colossal, internal tree. What in God's name is that? Reyes breathed, covering her mouth. Elias squinted. It looks like growth rings. But walls don't grow, document. They just stand there. Carter took a shaky breath, his professionalism utterly shattered. It's not just the wall, Detective. Look at the dimensions of the entire room. He pointed the camera toward the ceiling, then the floor. The readings show the same high-density anomaly in the entire north wall. But more disturbing, this room is shorter than the room next door. Shorter? Yes. By almost 3 inches. It means that wall isn't just denser. It's thicker. It's expanded, perhaps, or was built that way. And those concentric circles, they are centered on the black spot. I've never seen anything like it. It looks like something was pressing outward, slowly. Elias approached the wall, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. He pressed his palm flat against the cool, gray surface. He didn't feel anything, but he knew the truth of the situation had fundamentally shifted. They weren't investigating a wall, they were investigating a cover. Reyes, Elias said, his voice quiet and firm. Give me a core sample drill. Forget the warrant. We have probable cause that something non-human, or at least highly dangerous, is structurally compromising this building. Drill right into that black spot. I want to see what that tooth is hiding. Reyes nodded, her eyes wide but determined. As she turned to leave, a sudden, sharp click echoed from the wall next to Elias's ear. It was a sound like a tiny, heavy bolt being thrown. He snatched his hand back, staring at the small black disc. It was no longer smooth. In the exact center of the black material, a minuscule, crescent-shaped fissure had appeared. And from the crack, a thin, acrid vapor, like ozone mixed with burnt copper, began to hiss. The wall was listening. And now, it was opening. Reyes came back not with the delicate forensic drill Carter had requested, but with a heavy-duty Hilti core drill, the kind used to cut through building foundations. Her expression was grim. It's going to be loud, Vance. And it's going to get messy, she warned, tightening the diamond-tip bit. Elias motioned for the remaining uniformed officers to move back toward the apartment door. Noise is the least of our problems. Set the bit dead center on that fracture. Do not stop until you hit air. Dr. Carter stood off to the side, hands clamped over his ears, his professional panic now mingled with pure horror. Reyes braced herself and pulled the trigger. The drill roared to life, but the moment the diamond bit met the black, obsidian-like material, the sound changed. It was not the high, shrill screech of metal on stone. It was a low, resonant moan. The apartment shook, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered violently. It's not cutting. Reyes shouted over the noise, her face straining as she forced the tool forward. It's like drilling into solid diamond. The black vein where the bit pressed down began to heat rapidly. Smoke and vapor rose around the contact point, carrying a metallic tang, sharp like ozone. Elias grabbed Reyes's arm. Stop. Pull it out. She cut the power. The sudden silence was suffocating. The bit, engineered to withstand high temperatures, was scorched pale and warped out of shape. But the black vein had changed. Where the drill had bitten in, the crack had widened into a small, jagged opening, not a clean core, but a broken, gaping mouth. And from within that mouth came a wet, muffled sound. Shoo, shoo, shoo. What is that? Carter whispered, eyes locked on the wall. Sounds like breathing, Elias muttered, drawing his sidearm. The sound was slow, deep, rhythmic. Reyes flicked on her flashlight and aimed it into the opening. The beam did not penetrate. It was swallowed by an intrinsic blackness that seemed to reject light itself. Too dark, she said. I can't see a thing. Elias knelt beside the wall, ignoring the reek of scorched metal. He realized the shushishu wasn't breathing. It was something rubbing against itself. Something soft, slick, and enormous, moving inside a confined space. Then, from the black void of the opening, something slid into view. It wasn't a shadow, it was matter. A small, pale pink, translucent shape slowly emerged from the jagged hole. It looked like a swollen kernel of white corn, elongated, wet, and disturbingly alive. It protruded about a quarter-inch, paused, then snapped back inside. You saw that? Reyes gasped. What the hell was that? Elias shook his head, knuckles white around his gun. Something organic. Reyes, give me the endoscope. Now. She rummaged through the trauma kit and handed him the flexible scope. Elias fed the thin camera cable into the broken opening. The image blinked onto the small handheld monitor. The detectives expected to see the backside of the building's masonry, maybe insulation, dust, wiring. Instead, the camera slid into a cavity, a narrow, curved space lined not with concrete or plaster, but with something pale pink and wet. It was not the inside of a wall, it was a lining. The air inside the cavity looked heavy, damp, like the inside of a burrow. Elias guided the scope deeper. The cavity opened into a larger chamber. The camera beam swept across the darkness and revealed the impossible. They were not looking into a hidden room. They were looking inside something alive. The chamber swelled and relaxed with a slow, internal rhythm. Along its smooth, slick surfaces grew broad, calcified ridges of off-white and yellow, arranged in concentric spirals, the same growth rings Carter had seen on the thermal imaging. And at the very center of the chamber floor, the endoscope focused on a single horrific detail, a shredded pile of clothing and a glint of metal, Amelia Chen's apartment keys, lying beside a partially dissolved human finger. As they stared, stunned, the chamber convulsed. A massive shadow slid across the lens. The wet scraping intensified into a grinding, crushing shriek. The endoscope cable went taut, then snapped. The screen dissolved into static and died. And from the small, jagged hole in the wall came a new sound. It was not breathing. It was not grinding. It was the high, thin, distorted echo of a scream. The high-pitched, distorted shriek that burst from the tiny hole in the wall was not merely loud, it was vibrational. It hit Elias Vance and Serena Reyes not just in their eardrums, but in their teeth and bones, a sound that bypassed the ear canal entirely. The sound ended as abruptly as it began, leaving a silence that felt heavier and more suffocating than the noise itself. Elias, his ears ringing, stumbled backward, his gun raised and pointed reflexively at the innocuous plaster wall. What was that? Reyes choked out, her voice a raw whisper. She stared at the severed cable of the endoscope. The rubber housing melted and fused near the brake doctor. Carter didn't answer. He was frozen, his gaze fixed on the hole. The acrid, coppery vapor was now billowing out more heavily, and the air temperature in the small apartment had dropped noticeably. The hole, Carter stammered, pointing a trembling finger. It's closing. The small, jagged fissure created by the core drill, the mouth of the inner cavity, was receding. The black, obsidian-like material was migrating back to the center, pushing the broken plaster aside. The movement was impossibly slow and seamless, like thick, black honey oozing across a surface, hardening as it went. In less than a minute, the puncture was sealed, leaving only the original, unnervingly smooth black disc. It's healing itself, Elias muttered, lowering his weapon slowly. The entity inside was not passive, it was defensive. It absorbed the evidence and patched the wound. Reyes looked around the apartment, her paranoia mounting. Amelia Chen wasn't taken, Vance. She was absorbed. And if that thing is what's inside the wall, what's holding the rest of the building up? Dr. Carter fumbled for his communication device. We need to evaluate this entire building, Detective. Immediately. This isn't a structural anomaly, it's a bioarchitectural parasite. If it has permeated the structural load-bearing walls, the entire tenement could be compromised. We're standing on top of a massive, organic shell. As if in response to his words, a low, visceral thump resonated from the floor beneath their feet. It was the same slow, rhythmic sound the neighbors had reported, the wet cement dropping. But now, they knew better. It was a heartbeat. The building had a pulse. Elias grabbed Reyes and Carter, pulling them towards the door. Forget the evacuation protocol. We move now. Call the chief on a secure line and tell him we need the emergency services unit and a full hazmat team with breach charges. Tell him we found something too big for a warrant. They scrambled out of the apartment and down the narrow, dimly lit staircase. The thumping intensified with every floor they descended, no longer sounding distant, but immediate, heavy, and resonant. As they reached the second-floor landing, they encountered Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly resident, stepping out of her apartment, holding a small terrier. "Officers, what is all this noise? It's been so loud tonight. Like the pipes are talking," she complained, looking past them towards the stairwell. Elias tried to push past her gently. "Ma'am, you need to leave the building immediately." "There's a gas leak, she sniffed. "That's nonsense. It's the other noise I'm worried about. The slow one. It feels like it's right here." She pressed her hand against the wall of the second-floor hallway, directly beneath Amelia's apartment. She looked at Elias, her eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "And it's gotten faster, hasn't it? It started slow, 3 nights ago, when that poor girl went missing. But now it's like it's running." The rhythmic thump-thump-thump was indeed speeding up, morphing from a slow, deep heartbeat into a frantic, internal drumbeat. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. The floorboards beneath their feet began to vibrate. Reyes looked up the stairwell at the door of Amelia Chen's apartment. The metallic smell was now overwhelming, and she thought she heard a chorus of subtle, high-pitched scratches coming from the plaster. "Vance, the thudding isn't the only thing," Reyes whispered, gripping the railing. "Look at the walls." Elias followed her gaze. The old, patterned wallpaper in the hallway was bulging slightly, not uniformly, but in small, symmetrical nodes, like a fumbled bloom pushing out from beneath the paper. And as they watched, the nodes on the wall next to Mrs. Rodriguez began to move, a subtle, unsettling wriggling. Mrs. Rodriguez screamed, dropping her dog, which yelped and darted back into her apartment. "It's coming out," she shrieked, scrambling back against the opposite wall. The bulges ruptured. Not with blood or gore, but with a shower of plaster dust and fragments of lathed wood, revealing what was beneath. Dozens of the smooth, black, tooth-like discs, perfectly round, polished, and hard as obsidian, were embedded in the wall structure, having now rotated and fully exposed themselves. They weren't passive. They were all collectively turning, each one clicking open with a small, crescent-shaped fissure, like mechanical eyes suddenly blinking awake. The entire hallway wall of Precinct 47 was watching them. The entire hallway of the second floor was now a grotesque, anatomical nightmare. Dozens of the black, circular eyes embedded in the plaster were rotating slowly, each one emitting that thin, acrid vapor that smelled of ozone and pulverized bone. The frantic, internal thump-thump-thump had escalated into a terrifying drumbeat, vibrating the very structure of the building. Mrs. Rodriguez, shrieking, fumbled with her apartment door, trying to get back to her dog. "No, ma'am, don't go back in there." Elias roared, grabbing her arm. "Get down the stairs, now." But before he could pull her away, the wall nearest to them didn't just bulge, it fractured. A thick sheet of plaster exploded outward in a cloud of dust and debris. Behind the plaster, the lathe and studs were gone, replaced by the same moist, sickly pink, organic tissue seen inside Amelia Chen's apartment. It rippled, convulsed, and then, with a wet, tearing sound, it expelled its contents, a flash of movement, impossibly fast. A long, bone-white filament, tipped with a hard, calcified barb, shot out from the wall. It wasn't an arm or a tentacle, it was a sensory organ, hunting. It wrapped around Mrs. Rodriguez's ankle with a sickening snap. She didn't scream this time. She simply gasped as she was yanked off her feet and dragged toward the gaping, wet wound in the wall. "Reyes, cover!" Elias yelled, drawing his sidearm and firing 3 rapid rounds into the pink tissue where the filament originated. The bullets struck with a dull, wet impact. The filament holding Mrs. Rodriguez convulsed violently, but did not release its grip. Instead, the pink tissue around the bullet holes bled a thick, milky white fluid that instantly solidified into a porcelain-hard armor, sealing the wounds in seconds. Reyes, already halfway down the stairs, turned and brought up her weapon, aiming higher. "Doc, move." "Vance, aim for the black eyes." She emptied her magazine into the cluster of rotating discs, hoping to blind the entity. The rounds hit the obsidian-like surfaces with a shower of sparks, chipping the edges, but failing to penetrate the core. The creature's grip on Mrs. Rodriguez tightened. Her head hit the floor with a sickening thud, and she was pulled deeper into the wall. Now struggling weakly, Elias saw the horrifying futility of their position. Conventional weapons were useless. This wasn't a criminal, it was a geological horror. "Forget the eyes, Reyes. We have to get out," he shouted, shoving Dr. Carter, who was frozen in shock, down the remaining flight of stairs. The thumping beneath them abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. The entire building seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the wall, a new sound emerged, a slow, heavy grinding, like massive teeth shifting. The pink, fleshy cavity in the wall began to dilate, opening wider, revealing an abyss of darkness and the metallic stench of iron. "Down. Now." Elias screamed, pushing Reyes ahead of him. They sprinted down the remaining stairs, Reyes firing a frantic stream of lead behind them, not to stop the thing, but to slow its advance. As they reached the ground floor, they saw the desk sergeant, awakened by the chaos, peering up the stairwell with a confused look. "What in God's name is happening up there, detective?" The sergeant's question was cut short by a monstrous sound of splintering wood and tearing concrete. The main load-bearing wall of the second-floor corridor, directly above the stairwell, had given way down a cascade of wet, pink-white tissue, interwoven with splintered 2x4s and chunks of plaster, burst over the railing and slammed down into the lobby like a grotesque internal organ tearing free. The creature was no longer content to live inside the walls. It was becoming the building itself. Elias and Reyes dove out of the path of the torrent of biological matter, skidding across the slick precinct floor. Dr. Carter, having tripped, was covered in a slimy, solidifying white substance. Elias looked back. The stairwell was completely blocked by a pulsating, amorphous mass that glistened in the dim light. Small, black eyes were already forming within the tissue. "Precinct 47 is compromised." Elias roared, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed the panic alarm near the armory door. "We're under attack. Get out. Everyone. Now." He burst through the precinct doors, Reyes and the shell-shocked Dr. Carter right behind him, into the relative safety of the pre-dawn street. The rain had started, a cold, cleansing drizzle. As they stood on the sidewalk, catching their breath, they looked back at the facade of the old brick tenement. From a shattered window on the third floor, Amelia Chen's apartment, a single, bone-white filament snaked out and retracted quickly, tasting the rain-slicked air. The thumping returned, slower and deeper than before, echoing from the very foundation of the building. It was the slow, steady rhythm of a predator that had secured its territory. "We need to warn the chief," Reyes whispered, her hand still shaking near her empty holster. "This thing isn't just in the walls. It is the walls. And it just consumed a witness." Elias looked at the old building, now a horrifying beacon in the gray dawn. The bricks seemed to shimmer unnaturally. "No," Elias said, his voice flat with cold realization. "We don't warn the chief. We tell him we need to evaluate the entire Lower East Side. This is a containment problem, Reyes. And that thing, it just got a taste of the NYPD." Elias Vance's secure call to the chief was brief, brutal, and entirely unbelievable, until the chief heard the sound of screaming sirens and the frantic, echoing thump coming directly from Elias's side of the line. Within the hour, the New York City Emergency Services Unit, ESU, and the the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, had established a hard perimeter 2 blocks around Precinct 47 and the tenement building, now officially designated Containment Zone Alpha. The official story fed to the press was a massive, uncontrolled methane leak requiring immediate evacuation. Elias, Reyes, and Dr. Carter were sequestered in a mobile command center a few blocks away. Elias, nursing a fresh cup of coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, watched the live drone feed of the building on a monitor. The old brick facade looked normal, deceptively quaint, but the screen showed a constant, subtle, sickening vibration. The structural integrity is failing, Dr. Carter reported, pointing at the drone's infrared feed. The entire north face, where Amelia Chen's apartment was, is glowing with internal heat. And the sonic sensors, he paused, adjusting the frequency. The monitor displayed a complex waveform pattern. That's not just a heartbeat, detective. It's a rhythmic, pulsed contraction. It's actively consuming the internal structure, replacing the steel and mortar with that black, high-density calcification and the pink tissue. The wall entity is converting the building into an armored shell. Reyes, pacing nervously, looked at Elias. The chief is demanding a breach. He wants a team in there to confirm the remains and, God help us, find out what this thing is. Elias slammed his cup down. That thing is the building now. Sending ESU in there is sending them to the slaughterhouse. It learned from our drill. It knows we attack the weak points. A stern-faced woman in a CDC biohazard suit, Dr. Eris Thorne, leaned into the table. Detective Vance, we appreciate your first-hand account, but we cannot classify a tenement as a biological entity without physical evidence. We need a sample larger than a single, fossilized tooth particle. You want a sample? Elias pointed savagely at the monitor showing the melted tissue blocking the stairwell. It ain't Mrs. Rodriguez. Send a team in, and it'll send out the rest of the tenants as fossilized dental implants. This thing hunts by listening. He remembered the slow, rhythmic thudding. The sound had lured the neighbors into believing it was just a loud building. It uses sound to project an expected, normal noise, a dull thud, until it's ready to strike, Elias theorized, wiping the sweat from his brow. And when we attacked it, it screamed, a sonic defense. We need to disable its sensory input before we go near it. Reyes had a sudden, terrifying thought. If it's listening, and if its eyes are those black discs, what if it's not looking at us, but looking through the material it's made of? What if the whole building is its eye? Dr. Thorne cut in, decisive. We are moving forward with a breach. A two-man ESU team will enter through the alley fire escape on the south side, the least contaminated area. Their objective is retrieval and confirmation. Protocol Alpha is in effect. Neutralize the threat only if absolutely necessary for team safety. Elias knew this was a death sentence. Reyes, grab the thermal rifle, Elias ordered. We're giving them cover. If that thing moves, we hit it with everything we've got. Moments later, the drone feed showed the two ESU officers, their heavy gear making them look like ants, ascending the fire escape on the building's south face. They carried specialized shotguns loaded with flashbang rounds and tear gas, a desperate hope against an unknown horror. As they reached the third floor, the internal thumping, which had been steady, suddenly intensified into a rapid, furious flutter, thump, 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 thump. It hears them, Dr. Carter whispered, horrified. The drone camera zoomed onto the steel rungs of the fire escape. The metal was twisting. Not from external pressure, but from a terrifying, rapid corrosion. Black, crystalline formations, miniature versions of the black discs, were blossoming out of the steel, growing at an impossible rate. The ESU team leader shouted into his comm, his voice laced with panic. The ladder is freezing. I can't climb. It's growing into the metal. From the alley wall just beneath them, a massive, sickening cracking sound erupted. The south wall, the so-called safe side, bulged, tearing the brick veneer like paper. The wall entity wasn't just defending the contaminated north side, it was striking on the safe side. A display of grotesque intelligence, a single, colossal appendage, a thick, trunk-like protrusion of solid black, obsidian material, shot out from the ruptured wall. It was not a tentacle, it was a powerful, blunt hammer of calcified bone and mineral, moving with the force of a wrecking ball. IT slammed into the fire escape with devastating, high-speed force. The metal screamed, the sound echoing through the street, and the entire fire escape sheared away from the building, plummeting to the alley below with the two ESU officers still attached. The black, obsidian arm retracted back into the wall, which instantly sealed its own rupture with a fresh, sickening ooze of pink tissue and hardening armor. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds. Elias stared at the monitor, his blood cold. The wall entity was fast, armored, and could strike anywhere. He looked at Reyes, his face grim. It didn't just kill them, Reyes. It sent a message, Elias said, his voice deadly calm. It's not staying put. That thing is growing, and it's hungry. We need to hit it before it learns how to walk. The command center was chaos. Dr. Thorne was screaming into a secure line about insubordination, and the chief's furious voice was crackling over the internal comms, demanding to know why Detective Vance was still on site after the catastrophic loss of the ESU team. Elias Vance ignored them all. He stood over a digitized blueprint of Precinct 47, illuminated by the cold, tense glow of the screens. Reyes and Dr. Carter flanked him, the only two people who truly understood the nature of their enemy. The breach attempt failed, Elias stated, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. The entity anticipated the attack on its blind side, and it moved too fast for even the ESU. Conventional force is useless. We have to think like a structural parasite. It's a biological computer, Reyes whispered, tracing the concentric rings visible on the thermal scan. It processes the building's geometry and anticipates the weakest points. But it has a vulnerability, those black discs. They're its eyes, its ears, and its armor, the only part of the organism that doesn't bleed. If we can't pierce the armor, we have to disable the sensory inputs, Elias said, looking at Dr. Carter. Doc, you said the thumping is a pulsed contraction. What powers it? Carter, still shaken but focused, tapped the blueprint. The entire internal structure of the north wall is a massive power sink. That black, silica-based calcification, the tooth material, is acting as a conductive network. It's drawing energy from the building's old wiring and the very residual magnetic field of the foundation. It's essentially a gigantic, living battery. And the black discs? Elias pressed. They're not just armor, they're the conduits. They receive the sonic vibrations and transmit the energy back into the main biomass. If you destroy them, you don't just blind it, you disrupt its internal power flow, Carter explained. But you saw what happened when Reyes shot them. They're too hard. Elias looked at the drone footage again, focusing on the sealed rupture where the ESU team had been destroyed. If we can't shoot them, we have to shock them. Reyes, what's left in the ESU truck that's non-lethal and highly disruptive? Reyes immediately knew where he was going. The long-range acoustic device, the LRAD. It's meant for crowd control, sonic disruption. But the power pack on those things, it'll fry the internal circuits of a pacemaker from 50 yards. Perfect, Elias said, a cold plan forming in his eyes. We don't need to pierce its armor. We need to overload its sensory network and short-circuit its power grid. He looked at Carter. Doc, I need you to find me the closest point of entry to the entity's central power conduit. The oldest, most dilapidated steam pipe or utility shaft leading to the north wall. Reyes, already moving toward the door, paused. Vance, they'll have the LRAD unit locked up. We're fugitives right now. Elias gave her a grim, knowing look. Then we'll have to appropriate it. We have a biological weapon evolving inside an apartment building, and the brass is worried about procedure. This is my midnight watch, and I'm ending it. 10 minutes later, Reyes, using her old precinct keycard and a surprising amount of lockpicking talent she'd never mentioned, had liberated the LRAD unit from a nearby ESU supply van. It was a bulky, tripod-mounted weapon designed to project focused sound waves. They drove back to the perimeter under the cover of the continued gas leak operation. They set up the LRAD unit in a small, abandoned bodega directly across the street from Precinct 47. Dr. Carter pointed to the blueprint marked with a heavy red circle. There, beneath the third floor, where Amelia Chen's apartment is. There's an old, defunct sanitation pipe running right alongside the entity's most densely calcified area. If that thing is drawing power, it's using that shaft as a conduit. Elias sighted the LRAD across the street. Even from this distance, the building was unnervingly alive, the thumping now a rapid, frantic rat-a-tat. Beneath the bricks, we hit it with sound at maximum power, Elias instructed. Reyes, you fry its ears and internal wiring. Carter, you give me covering fire with the high-intensity floodlight. It might rely on darkness. Reyes took her position behind the LRAD controls, her hand steady. If this doesn't work, Vance will be throwing a sonic dinner party for a very angry wall. Elias nodded, his hand on the trigger of his own shotgun, now loaded with specialized slug rounds. When I give the word, Reyes, hit it hard and don't stop. He raised his radio to the secure channel, ignoring the frantic calls from the chief. This is Detective Vance, calling all personnel inside the perimeter. Brace for high-decibel acoustic interference. I am initiating an unauthorized, last-ditch attempt at containment. He paused, then shouted the command, Reyes. Open fire. Reyes slammed her hand down on the activation switch. The LRAD unit across the street didn't boom, it lanced. A focused, invisible beam of pure, overwhelming sonic energy screamed across the narrow street and slammed into the north face of Precinct 47. The result was immediate and catastrophic. The building shrieked, a raw, grating, inhuman sound that tore the air. Every window in the vicinity shattered instantly. The brick facade of Precinct 47 began to crack and fissure, and from every black disc on the wall, bright blue electricity arced wildly, smoking and sputtering. The discs weren't just listening, they were exploding as the sonic energy overloaded their circuits, sending showers of black shrapnel into the street. The frantic internal thumping abruptly slowed, stuttered, and died. The building was silent. It's down, Reyes yelled, adjusting the pitch of the sonic weapon, grinding the entity's auditory network into dust. Elias ran out of the bodega, a fresh tremor of dread gripping him. The wall was silent, but it was not defeated. The entity was merely deafened. He looked at the hole where the old sanitation pipe was located. It was wide open, exposing the core of the monster. Reyes, keep the sound on maximum. Elias yelled. Carter, stay put. I'm going in for the main artery. Elias Vance charged across the street toward the devastated facade of Precinct 47. The air was a cacophony of shattering glass, the metallic shriek of the LRAD, and the smell of burnt plastic and ozone. The building was silent, deafened, but still structurally menacing. He reached the hole Dr. Carter had identified, an old sanitation access panel that the sonic overload had peeled back like a soda can lid. It led directly into the heart of the entity's power network. Vance, the noise is draining the power pack. Reyes' frantic voice crackled over his earpiece, struggling to be heard over the RAD's relentless whine. You have maybe 5 minutes before the entity reestablishes internal equilibrium. 5 minutes is all I need, Elias grunted, pulling a handful of M80 smoke grenades from his vest. He clipped 2 heavy-duty plastic explosives, the kind used for breaching hardened doors, onto his belt. He dropped a smoke grenade into the dark shaft. The colored smoke immediately recoiled, sucked downward by a negative draft. The entity's breathing, now severely disabled but still present, Elias lowered himself into the dark, cramped hole. He was immediately enveloped by the stench of stale water, mineral dust, and that sickening, sweet smell of pulverized bone. He landed on a soft, yielding surface that was not earth or concrete, but a thick, cushiony bed of the white, high-density calcification they'd seen earlier. The air was unnaturally warm and humid. The only light came from the flashlight mounted on his shotgun, cutting a feeble circle through the gloom. He was inside the building's infrastructure, which had been entirely replaced by the wall entity's internal anatomy. He was moving through an organic tunnel. The passage was lined with thick, vein-like tubes that pulsed faintly with a deep, internal light, the entity's power conduits. The walls were not flat. They were convex, perfectly smooth, and coated in a slime that made every step precarious. Elias pressed forward, ignoring the panic rising in his chest. He was a homicide detective, not a cave explorer, but the instinct to neutralize the threat that had consumed his witness and his colleagues drove him onward. He rounded a bend and stopped dead. The passageway opened into a massive, cavernous chamber, the basement of Precinct 47, now unrecognizable. The chamber was dominated by a single, colossal object. The entity's core, IT, was a glistening, football-sized orb of the same smooth, black, obsidian-like material as the discs, but it was continuously, impossibly rotating. The rotation was slow, mesmerizing, and perfectly silent, generating a profound magnetic hum that made the hair on Elias's arms stand on end, thick bundles of the pulsing, vein-like conduits converged on this central core, feeding it energy. This was the heart of the wall entity. Elias raised his flashlight, and the beam illuminated the walls of the chamber. The smooth, white tissue was covered in grotesque trophies, not pieces of flesh, but perfect, horrifying sculptures of human teeth, fossilized and embedded into the lining. They were the source of the fossilized human dentin the lab had found. The entity was using the very essence of its victims to fortify its shell. As Elias moved toward the core, the ground beneath his feet began to tremor violently. Vance, it's waking up. Reyes screamed over the comms. The LRAD is cycling down. You're out of time. The sudden silence was deafening. The LRAD unit outside had gone dead. The core's rotation instantly sped up, transforming the slow hum into a high-pitched, resonant whine that filled the chamber. The vein-like conduits along the walls began to flash with bright, erratic electricity. Elias knew he had seconds. He ripped the 2 plastic explosives from his belt and slammed them onto the black, rotating core, arming the timers for the shortest possible fuse. 10 seconds. As he turned to run, a flash of movement. The walls of the chamber began to rapidly exfoliate. Layers of the white, fleshy tissue peeled back, revealing a new layer. Underneath, a massive concentration of the black, crystalline discs, opening like thousands of tiny eyes. The entity was now fully awake, its sensory input restored, and it was looking at him from the walls. Dozens of the bone-white, calcified filaments, thicker, faster, and longer than the one that had killed Mrs. Rodriguez, shot out, whipping through the air like harpoons. Elias threw himself behind a ridge of fossilized bone matter just as the filaments slammed into the ground where he'd been, standing, shattering the dense floor into dust. He scrambled back toward the access shaft, the detonation timer beeping a frantic count behind him. He heard the agonizing, tearing sound of the entity moving its massive bulk. The chamber walls were visibly contracting. It was trying to crush him before the core could explode. He reached the shaft entrance, grabbing the edges. The counter hit 5. A filament wrapped around his right leg, crushing his thigh in a vice-like grip. Elias screamed, firing his shotgun into the fleshy tissue where the filament originated. It bled the white, hardening fluid, but did not let go. The counter hit 3. Elias pulled his combat knife and, ignoring the pain, plunged it repeatedly into the filament wrapped around his leg, sawing through the tough, mineralized fiber until his knife broke off. The counter hit 1. With a final, desperate heave, Elias ripped his mangled leg free just as the core behind him detonated. The explosion was muffled by the thick, organic mass of the wall entity, but its force was devastatingly internal. Elias Vance was thrown upward through the narrow access shaft like a cork from a bottle, slamming onto the shattered sidewalk outside the precinct just as the ground shook violently. From the command center across the street, Reyes screamed into the radio. "Vance! Report! Report!" Elias groaned, dragging his mangled leg out of the rubble. The agonizing pain was a welcome sign of life. He looked up at the building. The sonic assault had already stripped away most of the plaster and windows. Now, the internal blast finished the job. The entire north face of Precinct 47 did not fall. It shed its skin. The brick veneer of the building's north wall detached in a colossal, cascading wave, crashing into the street and exposing the entity beneath. It was not a hidden monster. It was the building's new structure. Where I-beams and concrete supports should have been, there was only the glistening, colossal anatomy of the organism. The core had been destroyed, but the entity itself was a complex, self-sustaining network. The exposed structure was a terrifying mosaic, vast, undulating sheets of the pink, muscular tissue, ribbed with thick, pulsing conduits, all braced by a skeletal structure of the ultra-dense black calcification. It looked like the internal ribcage of a leviathan that had swallowed the city block. The explosion had damaged the central nexus, but the network was already compensating. The rhythmic thumping, though muted, began again, slower and heavier, emanating from the building's foundation. Reyes, the core is destroyed, but the entity is still alive. Elias yelled into his comms, his voice ragged. "It's regenerating. It's using the entire perimeter wall as its armor." Dr. Carter, staring at the exposed structure on the monitors, was hyperventilating. "It's a decentralized nervous system. The core was just the main processing unit. It's still connected to the foundation, the geological structure. It's drawing energy from the entire block." Suddenly, the exposed wall began to move in a horrifying, synchronized fashion. The black, calcified ribs began to grind against the pink tissue, and the entire structure started to contract. The contraction was not confined to the basement. It was a rapid, powerful compression of the entire building. The walls were shrinking inward. The remaining floors, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, groaned under the immense pressure. Steel supports, still embedded in the entity's flesh, began to buckle with screeches of protest. With a final, shattering sound, the top 3 floors of Precinct 47 were crushed into a mound of rubble and dust, leaving only the lower 2 floors, the part of the building most thoroughly absorbed by the entity, intact. The organism had violently jettisoned the parts of the structure it didn't need, making itself denser, shorter, and almost impregnable. The newly compacted shell, now low and squat, glistened darkly in the rain. It was no longer a building. It was a hardened, armored hulk. Reyes, pale with terror, watched the entity's evolution on the monitor. "Vance, look at the base. It's not just shrinking." The drone footage zoomed in on the street level. Where the foundation met the asphalt, the ground was cracking. Not randomly, but in long, perfectly straight lines that radiated outward from the center of the entity's base, like fractures on a massive sheet of ice. From the cracks, the dense black material began to ooze and solidify, anchoring the compacted structure to the sidewalk, the street, and the subterranean network beneath. "It's not just shrinking its body," Elias realized, limping toward the command center. "It's spreading its roots. It's reinforcing the foundation before it breaches the containment perimeter." Dr. Thorne, the CDC representative, finally dropped her clipboard, her face slack with fear. "This is not Protocol Alpha. This is an extinction-level event. It's a geological organism adapting and consuming mass. We need tactical nuclear, no. Elias shouted, leaning heavily on the doorframe, his adrenaline wearing off. It feeds on energy. A tactical nuke would just give it the power to consume the entire city block in seconds. We have to sever its connection to the energy source. Reyes pointed a trembling finger at the blueprint. The subprime conduits, vents. All the city's power runs directly beneath this street. If the entity is rooting into the geological structure, it's going for the main power lines, the steam tunnels, and the sewer network. It wants the entire underground grid. Elias looked at the clock. Less than 2 hours until dawn. The entity had gone from a hidden pest to an armored fortress. We go underground, Reyes, Elias decided, grabbing a new box of slug rounds. We can't fight the wall, but we can fight the root. Carter, find me the nearest manhole that leads into the utility tunnels running beneath Precinct 47. We are going to sever the jugular of this monster. The air in the utility tunnel was a suffocating mix of methane, stagnant water, and the sharp, metallic tang of the wall entity's internal fluids. Dr. Carter, eyes wide with terror but driven by scientific fascination, pried open the heavy manhole cover 2 blocks south of the containment zone, the closest access point to the main power lines, Elias Vance. His leg wrapped crudely but firmly, and Serena Reyes descended into the darkness. Their headlamps cut through the oppressive gloom, revealing a labyrinth of ancient pipes, fiber optic bundles, and massive, forgotten steam conduits. Carter says the main power trunk lines run directly beneath the precinct, less than 50 feet from where the entity compressed itself, Reyes whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline. She carried a powerful incendiary shotgun, a last-ditch solution against biological threats. Elias focused on the silence. There was no sound of distant traffic, no sirens, only the soft drip-drip-drip of condensation and the crunch of their boots on the gravel-strewn concrete floor. The entity's deafness had created a profound, unsettling peace above ground, but down here, they were too close to its internal mechanisms. Listen, Elias hissed, holding up a hand. The drip-drip-drip was not random. It was becoming synchronized, falling with the slow, heavy rhythm of the entity's recovered heartbeat. Thump. 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 It's not just sound, Reyes said, pointing her lamp at the tunnel wall. It's vibration. The subterranean concrete walls were humming softly. Reyes put a hand on a massive, abandoned iron water pipe running parallel to the tunnel. It was vibrating fiercely, cold to the touch, yet radiating an internal heat. It's using the metal conduits as sensory filaments, Elias realized. It's listening to the whole underground network. It knows exactly where we are. They pressed on, guided by the throbbing vibrations that intensified with every step. The tunnel began to change. Dust and grime vanished, replaced by a crystalline frost that covered the pipes and the floor. This was the black calcification material. Spreading its roots, they reached a junction where the tunnel widened into a vast, flooded junction chamber. The water, normally muddy brown, was now clear and unnaturally still. And through the water, they saw it, the main power trunk, a thick, triple-wrapped bundle of cables the size of a man's torso, was severed. And emerging from the stump of the cut cable, the black, dense material was actively growing. A T had formed a colossal, branching root structure, a network of black, mineralized tendrils that had drilled through the concrete floor and embedded themselves directly into the earth. The power surge the entity needed wasn't coming from the building's wiring anymore. It was tapping into the city's main grid and the geological structure itself. The largest root, thicker than a redwood trunk and ribbed with pulsating veins, was anchored in the center of the chamber, radiating cold and a humming magnetic field. This was the true lifeline. "That's it," Elias whispered, aiming his shotgun at the massive root. "We cut that, and the whole thing starves." Reyes pulled the pin on her incendiary shell. "On my mark, Vance. We've got to hit it with everything and get out before it reacts." Just as Reyes tightened her grip on the trigger, a sound came from the darkness above them, not the thump of the root, but a terrifying scrape. They looked up. The ceiling of the utility tunnel, directly above the massive root, was peeling back. Not falling, but unzipping. The calcified black material had been holding the roof intact, and now it was opening a massive, gaping hole directly into the street above and into the entity's basement. From the exposed aperture, something was lowered into the chamber. It was a massive, cylindrical appendage, coated in the same dense black armor that defied bullets. It descended silently, quickly. The appendage unfurled at the tip, revealing a complex arrangement of sharp, fossilized spikes, a biological drill head. Designed for rapid excavation, it plunged into the flooded floor near the central root, not to attack them, but to reinforce its own position. "It's adapting the tunnel," Elias shouted. "It's locking down the chamber. It knew we were coming." The drill head retracted and plunged again, faster this time, sending a shockwave through the water that knocked Reyes off her feet. She lost her grip on the incendiary shell, which skittered across the floor into the shadows. Elias, ignoring the searing pain in his leg, fired his slug rounds into the colossal drilling appendage. The heavy rounds sparked and chipped the black material, but did no critical damage. Reyes scrambled back to her feet, spotting the glowing red shell near the wall. "Vance, cover me. I need the incendiary." As she moved, a dozen smaller, thinner filaments, like surgical sutures of black rock, shot out from the appendage, whipping toward her. Elias emptied his shotgun into the main appendage, distracting the monstrous drill. Reyes snatched the shell and loaded it into her weapon in one fluid motion. "Get ready to blow the shaft," Reyes screamed. She fired the incendiary round. The round hit the central, thickest root with a blinding flash and a searing column of chemical fire. The root did not explode, but the flame, fueled by the entity's own volatile fluids, began to burn with a ferocious, pure white intensity. The colossal root structure screamed, a silent, internal scream that vibrated the entire chamber, shaking dust and debris from the roof. Elias and Reyes turned and ran, climbing over pipes and debris. The entity's retaliation was instantaneous and brutal. The black, crystalline material covering the pipes began to swell and fracture, then erupt into spikes. The very tunnel they were running through was closing in, trying to impale them. The detonators, Elias gasped, throwing the two remaining plastic explosives back toward the burning root. "Set them to the longest fuse. We need to buy time." Reyes, already running, slammed the detonator button. They scrambled toward the light of the exit shaft, the sound of the burning root a low, furious roar behind them, but as they reached the ladder, the light above them was suddenly extinguished. A massive, armored chunk of the black calcification material had slid across the manhole opening, sealing the escape route. The entity had successfully contained its prey. The chamber was plunged into pitch darkness, save for the flickering light of the distant chemical fire roaring from the severed root. Elias and Reyes were trapped. The entity had sealed the manhole exit with an impossibly thick, armored plug of the black calcification material, cutting them off from the world above. "It knows we cut the main supply," Reyes gasped, reloading her shotgun, the heat from the burning root already making the air unbearable. "It's prioritizing self-defense over consumption." Elias activated his body camera, casting a shaky light on the horrific scene. The cylindrical drill appendage, momentarily stunned by the incendiary blast, began to slowly retract back into the ceiling aperture. But the chamber floor was alive with movement. The smaller, Thinner black filaments, previously rigid, were now flexing and whipping across the ground, seeking out warmth and vibration. They were the entity's feelers, its sensory network below ground, now targeting the last sources of heat, Elias and Reyes. "It's hunting by thermals and vibration down here," Elias said, his voice strained. He grabbed a handful of frozen dirt and scattered it around them, attempting to disrupt their heat signature. "We need to get out of this chamber now." They spotted a small, rusted maintenance hatch set into the concrete wall, partially covered by the spreading black crystalline material. Reyes shouldered her shotgun, firing 2 rapid slug rounds at the rusted latch. The metal shrieked and bent, but held. "The structure is too reinforced," she yelled. "The calcification is acting like biological rebar." As she spoke, the closest of the thin black filaments snapped forward, wrapping around a steam pipe just inches from Elias's head. The pipe immediately groaned, buckling under the sudden, crushing pressure. Elias saw the detonators he'd armed earlier, still counting down, lodged near the blazing root. The explosion was timed to rupture the shaft and buy them time, but now it would just cave in the whole tunnel onto them. "The plastic explosives are still counting down," Elias yelled. "If they blow, we're buried alive." He and Reyes scrambled toward the burning root, dodging the whipping filaments that now covered the floor like an electrical net. The heat was scorching, their clothes smoking. Elias reached the detonators, which read T-30 seconds. The heat was so intense it felt like his skin was peeling. "I can't disarm them," Elias yelled, his eyes watering from the smoke. "The casing is melted. We have to blow them now, and hope the force opens up a weakness." Reyes, sighting her shotgun, pointed toward the maintenance hatch. "Forget the hatch. Look at the pipe next to it." She pointed to the steam pipe that the entity's filament was crushing. The pressure was building rapidly. The steam pipe. It's still connected to the city's boiler system. If that ruptures, it'll release superheated steam into the entity's core tissue. Elias finished, realizing the plan. The entity's tissues were meant to be moist and cool, not subjected to hundreds of degrees of high-pressure steam. Elias ignored the detonator and aimed his final slug at the steam pipe, just inches from where the filament was gripping it. On the count of 3, Reyes, "Shoot the filament. I'll breach the pipe." 1. The detonator timer hit 20 seconds. 2. A new, terrifying sound emerged from the main root fire, a sound of hissing and vaporization, as the entity's fluids encountered the pure white flame. The air was thick with the entity's dying exhalations. 3. Elias and Reyes fired simultaneously. Reyes' slug rounds hit the black filament, chipping off chunks of the armored material and weakening the entity's grip. Elias's final slug slammed into the compromised steam pipe. The pipe did not just burst, it detonated. A massive geyser of superheated, high-pressure steam, smelling of sulfur and ozone, erupted from the rupture, slamming directly into the surrounding crystalline roots and the fleshy tissue that lined the chamber. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. The entity screamed a sound that was no longer sonic, but a high-pressure venting of internal gas. The pink tissue lining the chamber walls instantly turned black and desiccated, shriveling into brittle carbon. The intense heat forced the black calcification material to crack, not shatter, but tear along crystalline fault lines, like hot glass doused in cold water. The 2 plastic explosives, still counting down, were instantly engulfed in the steam and heat. Boom. The secondary detonation was amplified by the rupture, tearing open the entire utility tunnel ceiling. The blast vaporized the desiccated organic matter and blew the massive, black armor plug out of the manhole above, launching it high into the pre-dawn sky. Elias and Reyes were flattened by the shockwave, debris and steam raining down on them. When the steam cleared, they were alive, lying beneath the gaping hole in the tunnel ceiling. They could see the gray, rainy sky. The escape route was open. Reyes looked at Elias, her face smeared with soot and blood. We did it. We severed the roots. Elias grabbed his gun and staggered to the ladder. Not yet, Reyes. The body is still standing. We need to confirm the kill. They climbed out of the manhole and onto the now cracked, steaming street, gasping for the cold, clean air. They looked across the street at Precinct 47. The compacted, armored hulk stood motionless. The black structural ribs were smoking, fractured, and lifeless. The rhythmic thumping was gone. The battle was won, but as Elias watched the dead structure, a movement caught his eye. Not on the building, but on the cracked, steaming asphalt near their feet, a single, small, black speck of the calcification material, no bigger than a grain of rice, detached from a piece of rubble. It didn't roll away. It moved. It crawled across the asphalt, seeking a crack, seeking dirt, seeking a way to implant itself. The entity was gone, but its seeds were still spreading. Elias didn't hesitate. He raised his shotgun and smashed the butt down onto the tiny black speck, grinding it into dust. The final hours of the midnight watch were a blur of screaming hazmat teams, frantic government officials, and the blinding flashes of forensic photography. Elias Vance and Serena Reyes, physically battered and mentally scarred, were pulled from the scene and immediately debriefed by a joint task force comprising the FBI, CDC, and a shadowy organization Elias suspected was something far older than the CIA or the NYPD. The official narrative created for public consumption was simple and effective: a catastrophic, localized geological shift caused by the rupture of an unstable, ancient salt dome beneath the city, resulting in a sinkhole that consumed the building. The remains of Amelia Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, and the two ESU officers were recovered and quietly processed as victims of a tragic industrial accident. The truth, however, was in the rubble. Dr. Carter, now a key operative for the specialized task force, confirmed the facts. The wall entity was a geobiological organism, a form of intelligent, mobile mineral life that had likely lain dormant beneath the city for centuries. It used the architecture of Precinct 47 as an incubator, consuming building materials and human life to create a highly dense, calcified armor and a sprawling, decentralized root system. It wasn't a monster that took over a building, Carter explained to Elias and Reyes in a secure, subterranean bunker a day later. It was a seed that grew into a building. And its method of growth, those concentric rings, the specialized material, it's highly adaptive. Carter presented them with a final piece of evidence recovered from Amelia Chen's apartment, a large, leather-bound book that had been hidden beneath her floorboards. It was a 19th-century architectural journal, filled with detailed sketches and obsessive, handwritten notes. Amelia Chen wasn't just a victim, she was a researcher, Carter said. She was studying a historical pattern, buildings across New York that were constructed with unusual density, always centered around a single, black, anomalous stone found during the foundation dig. She was looking for the original architect of this terror. The journal was signed simply, E.V., 1878. Elias's blood ran cold. The author had the same initials as him. The original architect understood the entity's life cycle, Carter continued. He found the initial seed, perhaps a piece of the original core, and built the tenement around it, intending to steady its growth. He used the architectural symmetry and the power lines to feed it, hoping to contain it. But the entity outgrew his control, and he sealed his research away. Reyes, staring at the old, faded sketches of the black discs, finally put the pieces together. He didn't just contain it, he perpetuated it. He learned how to cultivate it. Elias realized the true horror of their victory. They hadn't destroyed the species, they had merely pruned a single plant. The seeds, Elias murmured, remembering the final, tiny black speck he'd crushed on the sidewalk. It left behind viable pieces. Carter nodded gravely. We've contained the perimeter, but the entity's calcified seeds are highly mobile. They're like living mineral spores, designed to seek out new, high-density structures, hospitals, skyscrapers, transit hubs. Any place with a deep foundation and a massive power supply. He pointed to a highly classified map of the Manhattan grid, showing the location of Precinct 47 marked with a red X. Surrounding it were dozens of yellow circles, sites identified in the journal as possessing anomalous density. We've contained this outbreak, Carter said, but we are now engaged in a permanent shadow war against an organism that treats the city's infrastructure as its primary food source. Every time a new foundation is dug, every time an old building is demolished, we risk awakening another seed. Elias Vance, his career over, his precinct gone, and his mind irrevocably altered, looked at the map. He saw not a city of steel and glass, but a massive, interconnected